Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and I say this every week, but it's true every week. We're going to have a great show this week, and today is going to be extra special for all the reasons you know, and one of the reasons you don't. All the reasons you do know is that you guys have made us a global top 10% podcast, and therefore you are the world's greatest listeners. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle at bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, subscribe, hit like, give us a smiley star, whatever. You know how to do these things to make my life better, and that makes your life better, and that's a great thing. So remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And if you go to those show notes, buried in there, you can buy me a coffee, which would be really nice. Or you can buy me something else, a soda or a box of pretzels or something like that would be great. Today's unknown reason why it's so great is that we have a big brain, smart head guest on the show today. It is a charming young lady who is a prolific writer, an editor and writer at 1819 News, a contributing writer at Epic Times, author of Annie's Attic Substack, where she counters the great cataract of nonsense in our world with good old-fashioned common sense. Furthermore, she's currently involved in launching the Fred and Retta Skelton Center for Cultural Renewal, where their goal is to relay the foundations of that we have lost in society, family, education, faith, etc., by using historical lessons from the past and talking about the cultural rather than the political issues to get people thinking and give them ideas of practical ways that they can reclaim the culture. Her degree is a Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies from the University of Northwestern St. Paul. She specializes in historical aspects of America's educational structure. Among other things that she's doing, she's the lovely and obviously very talented Miss Annie Holmquist. Annie, how are you today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me today.
Well, it is a real honor to have you on. Like I said in the warm up, our pre-production meeting, that when I told people that I was getting Annie on the show, they were tickled, and it's a great thing. So I'm sure I've read some of your stuff before, but I came across in Epic Times in early March an article you wrote for Epic Times, and actually my wife read it, and she said, you ought to read this article here in Epic Times. It's about childhood success with 4 basic principles, and it was by none other than you. So I read it, and I thought, I'm going to contact this lady and see if she wants to come talk about this on the show. And, of course, you said very humbly, she was like, well, I'm not sure. I'm more of a writer than a talker. And I was like, oh, no. We'll get you on, and you'll have a great time. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for writing the article. And tell us, what are some ways we can give children success with your 4 basic principles?
Yes. Well, one thing that I really, for those who have probably read my different articles over the years, they will know that I don't exactly like to set myself up as the expert. Yes, I've had lots of experience working with children over the years. I've been a teacher in several different areas and stuff like that. But I like to go to the wisdom of the past a lot and pull out those different principles that people who I think are far wiser than me have done. So that's one thing I do a lot in my research. I go through different works, a lot of times works that people don't really look at anymore. And one that I was reading recently was Russell Kirk's autobiography, The Sword of Imagination. And for those who are not familiar, Russell Kirk was one of the prominent, probably conservative thinkers in the mid-20th century. And he was a very prolific writer, formed a lot of thought, ideas, different things like that. One of the interesting things in The Sword of Imagination, as I was reading, he was talking about his early childhood and stuff. And I started going like, oh, this is very fascinating. Some practical things that he really attributed his success to in life. The first one was just a happy family. one thing that he noted a lot was that his parents were not extremely educated or anything like that. Yet they produced this man that was a very scholarly thinker and impacted many people. I think he had mentioned that his father only had a sixth grade education. He was very just a blue collar laborer. He worked on the railroad. But he said that the interaction he had with his family was one of the greatest things that prepared him to encounter the antagonist world.
That's, I had gone through this article and I noted that statement as well as one that really stood out, is the fact that the way I see it, his home life being settled and structured and consistent, and I guess I'll call it nurturing, was that helped him when the world started coming at him, right? When you're going up against antagonism. And that seems to me like some people would say that maybe the best way to be prepared for antagonism is, best way to prepare for a fight is to fight. And I guess what we're saying is that's not the case, certainly when raising children, at least for Russell Kirk, that wasn't what he saw.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really appreciated this too was how he really attributed to his father. Just his father took time to just spend time with him. It sounds like they just sat at the edge of the pond and everything and talked about life. And that resonated with me because I had a father like that too, who, he wasn't hugely successful like a lawyer or anything like that. He just was an average worker and stuff. But yet he realized the importance of, doing the job so that you could provide, but then you could also spend time with your family. And that seems to be what Kirk's father did a lot too.
Yeah, I think the quote here from him in your article: sober, dutiful, always gentle and decent of speech, he spent his happiest hours perhaps lying with his little son in the shade of a great oak above the mill pond. And as a father and grandfather, I can see, because I just had my daughter just came over with her two little ones, mm-hmm. and she was over this afternoon for lunch. And that is, I played with a 3-year-old. I played the memory game, with the little cards that have the pictures on them, and you flip them upside down. And I did win. All right. Okay. but there's it's really amazing to me to watch how much they have to learn. Yes. And so it is difficult to watch a 3-year-old, and like there are strategies for the memory game. I don't know if you remember. I remember playing this game with my grandmother. Okay, I played with my grandmother in the early 70s. I played this same game, and like she would do things like always turn over this. She would turn over a card that she already knows, mm-hmm. instead of a card she doesn't know, and that's the kind of thing that I remember being a little kid and having to. No one ever told me. My grandma didn't tell me that. I mean, she just wanted that as her strategy to always beat me. But
yeah.
But it's those things that my grandkids will remember about me. They remember the equivalent. I mean, we don't have a great oak above a mill pond for us to sit under and watch the flies and the birds, but it's those things that they will remember, that they will see, that will hit them. And I think that's Russell Kirk said that was fundamental in his preparation for the antagonist world, which is to me interesting that those things line up. He said that Kirk said his father was faithfully working an average job to support his children, and I think that's is it Chesterton who said that the most extraordinary thing is two ordinary people living in an ordinary life, or something like that. And it's easy to get yourself down if you are not you're not I don't know, doing some sort of awesome greatness in the eyes of the culture, but that's not those aren't the critics that really matter. The critics that matter are taking a nap right now in the spare bedroom, right? So, and that's the way that comes about. So it was nice to see that happy family structure, and hopefully you work toward that.
Yes. And I appreciate that you bring up you interacting with your grandchildren too, because that was another thing that Kirk pointed out. He really talked about how his grandparents had a huge impact on him. Again, he talked with his grandfather a lot about things of history, different things like that. And so that really was thinking about that today. We see a lot, and I think there's even stuff going on more and more. I think there was an Atlantic article a few years ago that was talking about how families were breaking off from their extended families a lot more and just saying, oh, we need our space and everything like that. This is and I think that happens more and more because of where we're at into society. There's just a lot of differences of opinion going on. But with Kirk here and how he talks about how his grandfather influenced him so much, we're really losing that a lot when we cut off our family members, when we're not spending time with them, when we're not allowing our grandchildren to spend time with their grandparents. And it's really, they miss out on learning things from the older generation, that history getting passed down and everything. That is so influential on them in their future lives.
So it's the piece from his book that you quote here, him discussing himself and his grandfather. The two roamed over hill and dale and talked of the notion of progress. Notice the capital P, and the iniquities of Richard II, and the desire for immortality, and the significance of dreams, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. And to me, those are questions children will ask, and I'm looking forward to being able to hopefully share more wisdom than how to win at the memory game.
Yeah.
with my grandkids as they age. So Agnes is 3.5 and Clement is a year or something. And I'm very happy that the grandkids that are here in Indianapolis with us have two sets of grandparents nearby. And my son, who lives in North Carolina, they are without extended family nearby, but his mother-in-law is moving to the area, which will be a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's just good to have that, to have those ties in there. I tell people, because they ask what it's like being a grandfather. Mm-hmm. And it is, to me, it's called grandparenting for a reason. I mean, it's not just like meta parent or, extended parent, or it's called grandparenting. And the thing I like to say for anybody who's followed baseball, grandparenting is like being the designated hitter. Mm-hmm. All right. And because there's a couple levels to that model that work really well. First of all, you get to watch the game as a grandparent. You get to watch the game from the best seat in the house, which is in the dugout. And I don't know if you've been to baseball games or if you play baseball or softball, that the best place to watch the game is actually from the dugout. Because you were right there by the action. And if you can be on the first base dugout, it is just great because there's so much stuff going on there right in front of you. All right. So that's the first one is you get to watch the game from the best position. The second thing is you're seldom really used. Right. If you're the DH, you get up to bat like 3 or 4 times in a game. So you can go all day and you get up, I don't know, you see maybe 20 pitches over the course of the night, and that's all you have to do. Okay. You may get 3 or 4 at bats. It's easy to succeed. I mean, hitting a baseball is not hard, but you don't have to succeed that often to be, well, you get hit 1 out of 3 times, you're going to be close to leading the league in average. Okay. And that'll be great. Right. And if you get up there and you get on, and like typically you're the older guy, right? You're the guy that doesn't play the field anymore, but you still have a good bat. So you get out there and they say, okay, Pops, it's your turn. And you get up there and you take a couple warm-up swings and you hit if you get a hit and you're on base, cheers come from the dugout. You get a pat on the back. If it's late in the game, they'll put a runner in for you. I mean, what a great thing. But even better, if you double, or if you, heaven forbid, you hit a home run, the world will end. Okay, I mean, it is the like if you do a great thing with the grandkids, it is like hitting a home run. As a DH, you get to round the bases. There's lots of applause. They meet you at home plate. You get a lot of high fives, and then you know what? You get to go sit back down. Yeah. You get to sit on the bench. You sit with the coach. You sit with the trainer. You sit with the whoever they are, the second team, and the first team go. You say, "All right, go out. You guys go play the field. We'll watch from here." It is exactly like grandparenting, and every bit of that model lines up perfectly with that. So I highly endorse parenting, and then in due time, grandparenting, because it is from the grandparent perspective, it's awesome, and from the kid perspective, it's awesome as well, because those kids are starved for a piece of authority that's not their parents, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a wonderful thing to give to the kids, is to give them that piece of authority.
Yes, definitely.
So, regular reading exposure.
Yes.
I have to assume you had regular reading when you were a child.
I did. I was very much a reader, and that's actually probably what I credit for becoming a writer. I mean, I did not want to be a writer, oddly enough, but I loved reading. And so I think just that exposure helped me, and I think it obviously helped Kirk too, probably in his writing. It was interesting that he said he did not begin reading on his own really until age 7, but he got a lot of it from his mother, who read to him. And I think that's actually one of the really good things. I've said this a number of times in articles, but I think actually during COVID, I wrote an article when everybody was, at home doing their school. Parents were frustrated because, they had all these assignments from teachers and they didn't know what to do and everything like that. At that time, I said, you know what? Forget about the schoolwork. Just read. Read to your kids. Let them read, everything like that. From what I have seen over the years as I've done research, if you just teach your kids to love reading and to do it often, they're set, I mean, sure, that's maybe a generalization, but they're going to go so much farther than if they're doing all their schoolwork and just not really loving reading and kind of going through the motions. But if you're teaching them how to read, then they're learning how to learn for themselves. And I think Dorothy Sayers says that's the whole point of education, really, is to teach men how to learn for themselves.
Right. And that's what I said. I forget who I said this to, and I forget who said it. So I'm just a conduit. All right. I take great things people said and I pass them on to other people. Is that when you're young, you learn to read, and then when you're older, you read to learn. And I look at all the, I went to college and I went to grad school and got all sorts of fancy degrees, but I learned so much more now just sitting in my little chair over there in the other room, poring over books. And it is a component of my, I guess I'll call it my academic life, but I probably should call it more of my moral formation. Is I wish I would have read more.
Yes.
And I think as I'm getting older now, I'm like, I'm running out of time as if it's a race, I'm running out of time to get all these things done. And I have to say, I'm this close to being done with Brothers Karamazov.
I'm working on that one right now too.
Oh, okay. So, okay. My wife keeps saying, "What's going on?" I was like, "Oh, well, okay." I have to ask, how far are you?
I'm about, I think I'm around 230.
Out of what? 8? Well, it depends on the edition, right? I mean, and the translation.
So it's probably maybe about a third of the way through.
About a third of the way. Okay. Well, so I'm not going to I'm not spoiling, but she would ask me questions. What's going on with this guy? And there's 3 brothers, and they're all different, and they all represent different components of how you can look at the world. And then there's a dad, and have you seen that meme? There's a meme that has 4, it has like an American guy, a British guy, a French guy, and then a Russian guy. And the American guy, the caption for the American guy says, "I will die for freedom." All right. And then the British guy says, "I will die for honor." And the French guy says, "I will die for love." And the Russian guy says, "I will die." And
that kind of sums up this novel.
That's the whole. Okay. And people said, "What's it like reading?" I said, "Well, some books you read and it's like a drive. It's like a drive on a nice country road through the meadow and through the woods, and you see all these beautiful mountains. That's how some books are. This is like driving on a gravel road and a truck with 3 flat tires and no suspension. I mean, it's just, and you can see why. It's a great piece of literature, but it's just so. I don't want to say it's. I found it painful to read. It's just painful. It's like, here's a scene, and they talk at each other for
Yeah.
15 pages. And you're just exhausted when you get done. You're like, I just need a drink or something. So I have to do something different. I found it a very difficult thing to read, but it's strangely enjoyable. Strangely enjoyable, basically, because I'm so glad I'm not one of them. But so anyway, be careful when you read Dostoevsky, because it just make sure you have your seatbelt on. It is, and there are things that I was like, whoa, never saw that coming. There are things that are coming up that you're like, whoa, didn't pick that up. And I think the best thing to do is take the time to figure out how to pronounce the names. Because otherwise you just see them and you kind of go over them, right? You have to learn
over and over and over again, too.
And there's multiple names for the same person. It's just insane. But that way you really get a better picture of who they are. And the other thing I found, and I've mentioned this in the past, that I find it easier. My comprehension improves if I read out loud, which is difficult if I'm reading at night and my wife is sleeping. But it helps that way. Okay, so yeah. All right, so we got happy families, extended happy families, and I guess it would be regular reading, as long as it's not Dostoevsky too much, right? And then there was a fourth one that Russell Kirk raised.
Yeah, and that was freedom to explore. I thought this was interesting because, again, we hear a lot today about our bubble-wrapped society. And I think, there's this balance between parents want to be caring, they want to be cautious in everything, and you should be. But then, on the other hand, it seems like we have drifted just too far into too much caution. And kids really need some freedom to explore and enjoy and stuff like that. So I really appreciated that about him. He talked about how he just played around the town. They imagined they were playing the Knights of the Round Table. They, had their cardboard swords. And then also, too, he was also playing along with his grandfather. His grandfather was worked in the bank, and he was sitting there doing stuff in the vault with the safety deposit boxes and
millions of dollars sitting around you.
I was like, oh, how refreshing is that they're not, oh, don't touch that. He's just enjoying life, watching, observing, doing things along, and they're letting kids explore. And I'm sure he probably got hurt somewhat, here and there, probably fell off the pile of safety deposit boxes or whatever. But, it was fine, and he lived.
So did you grow up in a big town, a small town, a subdivision out in the sticks?
The city. So, yes. And actually, that is interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like I was in that last generation that actually still had a childhood, before technology came in. But I was homeschooled as a child. We were on the very early end of the modern homeschool movement. So we didn't really know a ton of families enough, but I really appreciated homeschooling for that aspect, because I feel like I actually got a childhood that way. I was able to play outside. We were able to goof off, imagine, come up with all kinds of weird games, cops and robbers and chasing each other and stuff like that. And I look back on that and think that was a really happy time. And I don't know, these days you drive around, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'll see kids out playing in the yard, and I'm like, oh, there's kids playing in the yard. It's such a rare thing. And it makes me so happy to see that.
My dad was on the homeowners board at his last subdivision, and they would get complaints from people in the subdivision that so-and-so is letting their kids play in the front yard.
Yes.
And they wanted the homeowners, the HOA, to tell them they can't play in the front yard. And I was like, okay, that was not a rule, but they thought it should be a rule. And I look back on this. I grew up in a little tiny town in Wisconsin. And mostly farms are on the outside, but there was a downtown, and the train went through, and there were 2 stoplights, and there was a big city hall. And I mean, it was your classic Midwestern town. And I as you're saying all these things, like we were on the last road. We were on 4th Street, which was the last street. There was one more street after that, and then it was farmland. And there was a guy that had a farm. It was less than a block from our house. And behind that, he had woods. And we used to go out to Joe Gehring's woods, and we would run around and turn over rocks and look underneath there and climb trees and do those kinds of things and step in cow stuff in the pastures and stuff like that. And we would go down to the train tracks. I mean, you've put pennies on train tracks. Have you? Have you not?
I don't know if I ever have, but I live by train tracks. We probably just
yeah. So we would take and that was the thing. We'd put pennies on the train track, and then the train would go over them, and then you'd they wouldn't sit right there. Eventually, they would fall off, and they would get squished down to this little tiny bit of copper. But we had friends that would jump the train. They would jump on the train. It was rolling through town, and I was like, are you okay? I'll tell you. In The Brothers Karamazov, there's a character that generates the esteem of all his young boyfriends, his friends who are boys, right? The cool kids.
Yes.
There's a rumor that it's possible to lie on the train track while the train goes over. Okay, that's a rumor in town. And everybody says, yeah, it can be done. And people are like, no, it can't be done. Yes, it can. No, it can't. Yes, it can. No, it can't. And the kid goes out and he does it. And he immediately vaults to the top of the social hierarchy because he did that. And he doesn't tell anybody that the only way he survived is he was so scared he fainted. All right, so that's coming up. That will be coming up if you haven't gotten there yet. I hear this statement about when you said we have to be careful, but yet we can't be too careful. And I keep thinking of this. I always used to think about the idea of staying between. It's easy to take an extreme position. An extreme position is one that's really easy to take because you don't have to think. You're always just like, well, I just do whatever I want. Or, no, I always follow this rule to the letter. I mean, both of those are extreme positions. But I always thought that it's probably better to stay in the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. But our friend Chesterton says that no. You need to embrace both sides fully. Mm-hmm. Right? Both sides fully. Yeah, and you get balanced that way, but you both get to see what's on the extremes. So Chesterton would say you have to be very, very careful and live dangerously at the same time.
Yes.
And I think we kind of did that when we were kids. Eventually we learned playing lawn darts over the house is unwise. We had people that did that. They would throw these things over the house, and somebody would be on the other side watching to see where. So we stopped doing that anyway. So it's fair to say Russell Kirk did not have a phone in his pocket, or he was not exposed to computer screens.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, it's a good lesson for all of us as we look around, like, how can we encourage a return to common sense or normalcy, if you will? And I think that's just one very practical thing that you can do is to encourage kids to play outside. Don't be that neighbor like, why are your kids walking down the road? And because people don't need to deal with that. It's hard enough for them to get over their fear of, okay, I'm going to give you a little more leash to try to get out, to try to become an adult. And I think a lot of times what's holding parents back today is what other people are going to think, that they're going to get in trouble, that Child Protective Services is going to come after them. And when they're really only doing just things that parents have done for hundreds of years and letting their kids grow into adults. So I think that's one practical thing that we can think about. How are we responding to the kids we see around us? Are we being that nosy neighbor that's saying, no, or are we, good for you, keep doing it?
Or we say, well, let me give you a little hint. When you take that board that has the nails in it and you take it off the tree, put the nails pointed down so you don't step on it. That kind of, I mean, so that's what I always try to do that. I encourage, we have a pond here, a retention pond in the subdivision, and it sits right out back out that window over there. And this winter it was pretty cold for a number of days in a row, and ice formed on the pond, and then we had real ice on the pond. And at one point I saw somebody out walking around on the pond, and, there's signs all over the pond, that, fishing for members only. And then it was like no boating, no drinking, no bathing, no, what else you would do in the pond. But and you're not supposed to skate on the pond. And it's like, okay, it's 7 feet deep, maybe it's just a retention pond, and they don't want to dig it too deep because it's expensive to dig it deep, but you have to have some sort of flood control. I got it. It's all good. we had a pond when I think we were in possession of the deepest body of water in Dodge County, Wisconsin, at like 16 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a little canoe. We'd canoe around there, and we'd do some fishing in the summertime. But in the winter, that was great because it would freeze over. Most of it would freeze over. And we had a friend who had a pickup truck with a plow on the front, and he would plow the pond off for us. And we'd play hockey, and we invented our own games there on the pond. And it was a regular thing to do that. And we knew when the ice was not safe because you would go down there and check it. You step on the edge, and every now and then at the beginning of the year, if you would check it, it would collapse under your feet. You'd be like, well, I better not go on it today. And I keep thinking, why can't we have, like, it would bring my heart such joy. I would do a special edition episode of this podcast just to talk about hockey on our little pond, if it would actually take place. But we don't do it. And I talked to the HOA president the other day, and I said, I understand there's risk. What's the big risk? And the big risk is if somebody would fall into the ice, is we would get sued.
Yeah.
Even and that's something that's in my head. I was like, I can't imagine somebody. It's like it's a body of water in North America in the winter. It will be cold. It may have ice on it. The ice may or may not support you. How can that not be the fundamental thing you learn in school?
Yeah.
Or that there's a bacon package you buy, and it says instructions on how to cook bacon, and the instructions say, if you really don't know how to cook bacon, sue somebody in your school district. Right? And I was like, I think that's I keep going back to that. I want them to play hockey out here, and I don't know how. Well, it's never going to happen, and it just makes me sad. Mm-hmm. So it's not one of the good things we talk about. So anyway, that's Russell Kirk and 4 things that you should do if you want to be successful. And I assume you did most of those things.
Yes, probably. I have to think. I mean, to some extent, but probably not. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s rather than the early 90s.
You guys didn't.
You can see a little bit of a difference,
Oh, it is. There's some things that are great about today and some things that are terrible. And I think that's probably like all things. We look with nostalgia back at our times, and well, that's the way that goes. We are, holy cow! Look at the clock there. We're getting close to time. Annie, I'm going to ask you one question that you have not been prepared for, but I'm going to ask you to what would you tell our listeners on a hint, a secret, a piece of advice on how to seek the good in what they do every day? What should they do to aid in their seeking the good?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we were talking a little bit before. One of the most important things is to follow the Lord, and if you have that right, it's everything else is going to fall in place. It's interesting you actually bring that up because I was writing another article today, and with that, I was looking at another old resource, and this is actually one I got from Russell Kirk too. But it's a book called Crisis in Education, and it was written, I think, 1949, and by Bernard Eidings Bell. I'd never heard of him before, but apparently he was author, educator, and stuff like that. But he said some very interesting things just about how you can create an intelligent child. I thought, everybody, wants their kid to be successful and everything like that.
And this was 1949. He was saying this.
Yes. In fact, he was complaining about the schools, and I thought, sounds like it's today, but it's probably a lot worse today,
Right.
Anyways, but he said, he named 3 things. He said the liberal arts plus humanistic studies plus religion. That is a proper discipline for the potentially intelligent. Nothing else can take its place. So, of course, naturally, and he said this too, the liberal arts and humanistic studies, and by humanistic studies, he was just meaning the things which throw light on man and his behavior. Sometimes we can look negatively on humanism and stuff like that. That's what he meant by it. So he was saying, of course, you want to study the liberal arts. That's classical education. You're studying the grammar, the rhetoric, the logic. the other things like that. And then with the humanistic studies, you're studying history, literature, fine arts, just getting that well-rounded education. And he noted that, yes, you're going to get that in a lot of places. But the interesting thing was that he added that third one, the aspect of religion. And with that, but he said the only effective way to keep genius from going astray is for it to know and adore the infinitely great. And infinitely great is in capitals. So he's talking about God. Because if you don't have that training in faith, religion, the understanding of God, the individual becomes puffed up. And so you need that balance of knowing God, of knowing his character and everything like that, to balance out with the learning that goes on. So that would be my piece of advice. Follow the Lord.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Annie, it has been a pleasure having you on today, and I hope we'll be able to chat again sometime to get more. I'll keep track of when I see some other things. I already have 3 other articles that I've printed out that I wanted to get to today, but I knew we would never get there. So we're going to have you back sometime if that would be okay with you.
I would like that.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. So in the meantime, all the rest of you, you know the spiel: seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.